You're listening to Liberty USA, sponsored by County Citizens Defending Freedom. As an American, you have freedom flowing through your DNA, and we are here to help educate, empower, and encourage you to stand for your freedom.
All right, welcome to Liberty Podcast. I have Stephanie Madden here with us, City Commissioner of Lakeland at large, and she is our special guest, and we're excited to have her here today. So welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here today.
Great. Well, I wanted to start out by you sharing a little bit about yourself, your background, personally, career-wise. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I am 52 years old, and I have been married to my high school sweetheart for 30 years this year. And we got married early on and started having children, and we started a promotional marketing company in our 2-bedroom apartment. And we still have that company today, Madden Branded Goods. It's 26 years going strong. And, after having 6 children and starting a small business, I had been watching local politics just a little bit, really was more focused on national and state politics, but I had some friends who were running for mayor and running for city commission. I thought, well, I wonder what the interest is in city commission. And there was one female on the commission I knew, Edie Yates, and she was term limited. So I said, well, who's the female that's going to be on the commission? Who's running? And my husband was like, well, there is not a female running, to take her place. And so I thought I was kind of joking by saying, well, maybe I should run. Been really involved as a past president of the Junior League and on the boards of different community organizations like Lighthouse. And so just, always been involved in the community, but never really ever thought about running for office. And he just took it so seriously and thought, maybe we should check this out. And it, obviously, talked to some friends and got some support and ran against an incumbent and, 3 or 4 other people. So it was a pretty big race, but being in the marketing business, that helped us. And, as a mom of 6, I just thought, with all the been in 10 different schools in town and on lots of sidelines of sporting events, and just felt like the regular families, to be able to have a voice, at the city level, would be an interesting prospect. And so, won that election and was up for election again this past fall and won the election again. So I'm in my second term. And, you think about politics, from a national and state level, the local level for city commission is nonpartisan. And so it's a little different. You've got a $600-700 million budget.
Sure. And
lots of interesting issues with an electric utility, publicly owned, and an airport, and in a time of growth. And I just thought,
yes,
for our children and our grandchildren, it's important for people who aren't necessarily looking to run for office, to just have an extension of their career or their public service and community service, to take a seat at the local level. And so I've really enjoyed, being a city commission. It's been a little challenging,
Sure,
through COVID,
yeah.
but I'm a grandmother of 3 little grandbabies and have 6 kids, and only my 16-year-old is still at the house. So I've got a couple at University of Florida, got one who just graduated from West Point. Amelia works with us at our office. She went to Ole Miss. And then my oldest is the one, who's married and has the grandchildren. So
okay, very good. So as a city commissioner, is it everything you thought it would be, or were you caught off guard by different tasks that came before you? So,
I think people who follow local politics know it's the 2 city commission meetings a month, first and third Monday, and then the agenda setting on the preceding Friday.
Right.
But each commissioner is appointed to boards and different committees.
Okay.
So, I'm the liaison to Lakeland Electric. So I do a lot of webinars on production, transmission, and generation of electric energy. It's a really important topic. And then certainly going into the next decade with all of the green energy initiatives and a global pivot towards that, maybe a major disruption, to how we've produced electricity for 100 years.
Right.
So that's a big issue. And so that could take over my life if I let it. And then, I'm on the Tourism Development Council, so that gets all the bed tax for the county. And then we appropriate it to different facilities and amenities throughout the county in different cities. So that's something unique to my position, I've been on the CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, so I was on there for several years. You get to see how those tax increments in those blighted areas go together collectively to build a Haas 820 or to build a joinery. Just kind of fun to see how there's public-private partnerships, to kind of invest in areas, to rejuvenate areas. So it really, I think, has more dynamism to the job. There's more opportunity that are so my colleague, Commissioner McCarley, she sits on TPO and she's the transit chair. So she's going to be more focused on citrus connection and our bus routes and micro, multimodal transportation and the roads. So we all have to know a little bit about everything,
Sure.
like water and wastewater and the airport, but each of us kind of takes a particular topic. Yes. Like I was the broadband chair, and that's kind of coming to a close because we have a P3 with Summit Broadband, and they're going to be deploying that soon. But that was a huge thing to get up to speed on all the current technology in the broadband world and think about things like the digital divide. So I think it's more probably exciting and dynamic and has more facets than I originally thought.
Okay.
And it's probably less about issue. Like when you think about politics, you think about issues.
Okay.
And I was surprised it's a lot more about a budget and a lot
managing.
more. Yes.
Managing that budget and managing a city. With that, what do you wish the citizens or your constituents could understand better about your position so that we can work together as a commission and the citizens of this city?
So I would say a lot of people don't know about the sunshine laws in Florida. And so that means that if you work on a team, if you're, on a PTA board, or if you're in a team at your office, you get to co-conspire and work things out and ask questions and vet ideas, right, together. Right. And then, let's say you're trying to make a pitch to a customer, you'd feel like you've really fine-tuned that and you've got your PowerPoint ready and you're going to go for it. You still don't know exactly how they'll reply, but you've done your best to get it as succinct and as polished as you can.
Sure.
So the commissioners are not allowed to do that.
Right.
And so we're supposed to be a team collectively representing the views of the community. And we get emails and we talk to people at Publix and at the library and at sporting events, and they give us notes about their neighborhoods and their concerns. And then we take those things to 2 city commission meetings a month with the preceding agenda study, and we're on TV, we're live, the media is watching, and we have to try to remember all the things that we've heard from citizens, and then also address, ordinances and resolutions that have been predetermined. Some have been in the works for a decade, and read all of the material on those to make sure we're making sound decisions on the things we actually have to vote on as we trickle in new talking points or new conversations that are important to our citizens.
Right.
And then I have to see, okay, did I feel like I got any traction on that? I brought up with Miss, Sally said about this interesting topic. I have to see if I could get 4 of the 7 to go forward on an initiative and ask staff to pursue that. Sometimes we might get a workshop to be able to talk about an idea in more depth. We might need what the city attorney has to say about it if we have legal rights. An interesting thing was, like, we had a pastor who came to the meeting recently, and after 4 years of office, never had anyone bring up a pro-life issue. You kind of think of that as a national issue. And was surprised. Wow, he's come and he's asked. We listen to everybody. We listen to every citizen. That's our job. So I asked the city attorney, would a local level, commission have any legal right to be able to do anything on that, have a sanctuary city, something like that? Well, he has to go do research. We haven't really gotten back on that topic. It didn't look like I got a lot of traction from my colleagues. They're looking more to the Supreme Court or the state level. But, that's something that, I think could be a really interesting issue to discuss.
Sure.
But oftentimes it takes a little bit of conversation along the way to try to build some enthusiasm or see if, and there was not a public, not that a lot of people watch our meetings, but if people were and heard that and that was their favorite issue, you would hope that then they would flood the city commission and, make T-shirts and email me. But if we hear nothing, then usually those issues. So if the community knew how, if they have things that are important and they show up and they have T-shirts and they send emails, it really, really, really affects, the direction of the commission. And I don't think people understand how powerful their voices are on a local level.
And being involved and showing up. So yeah, I think that that's really good. When we met with you the other week, you gave a really good example about the statue being relocated and how that was a sensitive subject, and there was a lot of strong opinions on both sides, and I just loved the way that you explained it. Will you explain that a little bit
Yes.
again?
So here I am, a new, commissioner neophyte, and I'm like, what? We're handed this from the previous commission had voted to move this monument, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm not in favor of moving monuments. Like you would take whatever you would, even though we're nonpartisan, you would have a partisan affiliation, or you would have things that you feel like you believe when you go into the job. So I'm thinking, oh, it's going to erase history. I've got a son at West Point. I hope that if he fights and dies in a war that's unpopular, he would still be able to be honored, for his service. My daughter had been at Ole Miss. And so even though we're not Southerners by birth, my mother-in-law was a Southerner, and my daughter went to Ole Miss. It's very Southern, kind of went through a controversy about their mascot, Old Reb.
Sure.
And so I felt like I really need to hear from this on all sides. Like I need to embrace Southern heritage and see what they're saying, the folks who saved the money to, erect the monument. I have to take into context that this city, Lakeland, was segregated till the 60s, and my own city commissioner colleague couldn't swim in our pool because, of the color of his skin. And I hear from families who lived in the northwest area of town, which is where they were relocated after history had already been erased, because Moorhead, their community, was basically mowed down to build the RP Funding Center.
Yes.
Well, I didn't know these stories. And so if I would have just gone with my gut or what my preconceived notion about what I thought it meant to move a monument, then I would have missed an opportunity to really come up with a creative solution. It's not that any side gets their perfect wish. One side might have wanted to blow up the monument because it reminded them of segregation and slavery and all the things, and oppression. And then you'd have the other side say, don't move monuments at all. They should never be moved. That erases history. It's a slippery slope. And then soon we'll have, nothing left. And so, but here we are, it's our decision. And we're the ones in the arena having to get messy and dirty and listen. And we had public hearings that went till late into the evening, and they were full, and person after person after person was at the microphone telling their story. And at night I'd sleep and I'd think, okay, if I had a house and my grandmother painted a painting in the front room, and I found that people were offended every time they came to my house, I could either say, well, that's my grandmother and I love her and I could defend my grandmother's honor, or I could move it to my bedroom where I could still enjoy it and I could still be hospitable in my front living room. And I started to think of, someone in the crowd said, why don't we focus on the hospitality part of being Southern in our downtown square? And maybe there's a more appropriate place for us to honor, all wars, which is in our Veterans Memorial Park. And so to me, this was a tumultuous battle in my mind. Like I thought, I don't want to make this decision. This is harder than I thought. This is more complicated. I did, but I feel like I couldn't have made it without hearing from every citizen from every side. And I recently went to DC. I was talking to Congressman Franklin. He was on the city commission with us.
Yes.
And we were talking about lobbyists, because that's what you're there to do, lobby. I was there for public power, of all things. And it was a great example that came to us. It's like, if that's your issue, you should push as hard as you can to the side you're on. Push as hard as you can. That's your job. That's your issue. But I have to hear from the other side and let them push as hard as they can and push as hard on their side of the issue. And hopefully at the end of the day, I'll stand up straight. And I thought, that is a really good, but I feel like that's what happened with the monument. I heard from all sides, and they were extreme, and it was vitriolic, and people were angry on both sides. And yet at the end of the day, I look at that monument in Veterans Memorial Park. I think it's contextually appropriate. It's in those pine trees. It's with all of the other soldiers in our other wars. We can still go there and feel like we can honor those soldiers for whatever war they fought, for whatever the cause. And yet our downtown square now can be open to all. And those families that were segregated, or who couldn't drink in our water fountains, or who couldn't enjoy our downtown square, it was a signal to them that we were open for everyone. So it was a big deal.
It was a big deal. And you've had a couple big deals throughout your 2 terms that usually, it doesn't get so hot topic like that, but you've had a couple through it. So what is something current that you feel the city is dealing with that might be a current topic?
Okay, so during COVID, we had to relax a lot of things.
Yes.
So we relaxed sign ordinances so businesses could write on a piece of cardboard if they needed to. We were open and I advocated for that. I thought, I know we like to have beautiful signs and have rules, but to me, it's beautiful to know that we're still open in spite of a global pandemic. And I really advocated for small businesses to be open because I'm a small business and I understand that. And, I got a lot of criticism kind of for prioritizing business over health, or, there was a lot of vitriolic email that, if you're focused on a small business, then you want people to die, and that would be, the narrative in my email box. And you're like, what? I do not want people to die. And, then of course the mask issue, which, I had, protesters in my yard, and, it was just interesting how political things could get during a health crisis, but they did. So one of the things that we relaxed was some of our efforts in downtown for homelessness. And so, we knew that our homeless shelters were overburdened and how could they be social distanced and how could they do some of the things? So we had probably more homeless in our downtown squares. And then you have your retail establishments who are trying to have their business. And, it's one thing to be homeless. It's another thing to, be defecating in front of a retail establishment or, preventing access to a public, to our library. And so we know the difference in those nuances. But yet here we come together in a conversation with our colleagues, and it's not like we've worked it out and have the perfect verbiage when we come together to talk. And so some of my colleagues were frustrated. We've received emails that, you move the plug on the bottom of the base of the poles to the top so there wouldn't be as many homeless in Munn Park, so we could have that be free for everyone. Now they've all moved down to Lake Mirror. They're going to block entrance to the joinery. What are you going to do about this? And it came more from a nuisance side. Right. Well, when you're having that conversation, then all of a sudden we've had a flood of inbox emails from homeless advocates throughout the country who, you should love homeless people. We've been through a lot. They are our, most vulnerable citizens, and we support the people who help them, which, when you think about homelessness, we for 5 years have been dealing with the homelessness as a commission, and it's not one issue. So you think of, you have panhandling, and then you've got, First Amendment rights on being homeless and panhandling. And then you've got, people with, who are chronically homeless, meaning, they have a disease or a situation where they'd like to be homeless. So we are working with different agencies throughout our city, whom we have so many charitable organizations. And I believe that's the first, very best, that's better than government to have them working on it. But then there's the families. And so there's a group called Peace, and it's an ecumenical group of churches and organizations who gathered, and they've been advocates, to their credit, they've been advocating on this issue for years. And they came and they said, what about our homeless families? And Hearth does a measure, like they count all of the homeless kids throughout the county. And it's horrible. Like you hear 1,600 homeless children, the numbers are terrible. Yeah. And might have been they just lost their home, or they just divorced and lost their income. And so that's a different category. So what we started to learn is, instead of giving vouchers because here, let's help you with rent assistance, we didn't have enough units at all. Like Lakeland didn't have enough housing for everyone, not just for homeless. And then you open up, that's not a national issue, that's a global issue. Oh, and then by the way, we're the second fastest growing area in the country with Winter Haven. What are we going to do if we're already behind? And so we had been looking at Chattanooga and Greenville and getting excited about the way we wanted to grow, growing smart and growing bright and getting new good jobs and having beautiful parks, and thinking of kind of like painting the vision of who we want to be, you know, not thinking about, when I read some of these stories, the people who were left behind through the gentrification efforts and I was like, oh, we've got to make sure at the same time we're thinking about all of our citizens and that no one's left behind at the end of the day. And so that became a huge priority. So, we started to, give lots, do an audit of the lots that we have owned by the city. Could we give those at a reduced rate to a builder to build more affordably? And then there are groups that can help with the down payment assistance. We navigated and tried to come up with as many ways as possible to try to get more units. And we really came up with, multifamily because that was what we didn't have a lot of.
Right.
And that is sort of what we've done an audit of all of our land. Developers know that we want to work. We've got money set aside and appropriated to work with developers in P3 partnerships, because if I spend city money, $1 million, how many units can I get? How many houses could I build? How many? Not that many. But if my million is leveraged with 7 million or 20 million of private investment, and they can use my city money to go to get state and federal funds that are allocated, we've really found that is a best practice. Like, other people have started to see how much momentum we have, how many units we've been able to add quickly. And I use this as an example to say, we could have just argued an issue about homelessness and should there be homeless people in the park or not, or you can pull it into one tiny segment of that conversation, or you can be like, no, this is a much bigger, let's dive a little deeper. Let's talk about this. Who can deal with the chronic homeless? Who can, Peace River, they can do the folks who have mental illness. Yeah. Who are the families who just barely lost their apartment because they couldn't pay the rent? Oh, we don't have enough units at large. Who could build more units? And I say this as an example because most every issue is like this. No issue just has one silver bullet or panacea. Right. And it's not a left or a right issue. And if we get so busy arguing the left or the right side of the issue, we never get in the middle and say, let's solve this thing. Let's do this before we have radical growth. Let's make sure we have more units, because then guess what? Those agencies who give free vouchers actually have a unit to give them a free voucher, or rent a too. And so I think that you asked me kind of about an issue that's current. I could be overwhelmed with all these emails. Like, I don't hate homeless people. What did they hear us say? What did we say again that caused this influx of all these emails? And it's very visceral. Like, you'd think it doesn't matter. We read all of our emails, and sometimes they're a form letter, and you're like, okay, I get the picture. These are all copy and paste. So I'm noting the names, and they usually put their address. If it's Lakeland, I'll reply to them. I can't reply to the whole country. Right. But it's, if I stop there and I get all in a whirl over the merits of two sides to the story, I really lose the opportunity. And so I hope you see, both on the monument and on this homelessness issue, like, there are possibilities and there are solutions and strategies if we work with our city staff and our citizens. And the more stakeholders that come to the table and talk to us, even if we disagree at the beginning, the better the outcome for the whole city. Sure. So.
No, I mean, I think it's, I think too many people don't recognize the challenge that it is when you have so many people that you're trying to satisfy, acknowledge their concerns, acknowledge their heart when it comes to these things, and bring a solution that benefits the majority. It's challenging. Yeah. It's challenging. And I don't envy that about your position at all. As a mother of 6, I'm certain that education is important to you. You mentioned all of your kids and the colleges that they've been to. In Polk County, we have the school board election coming up in August, and we have 4 seats. What advice would you give a candidate who's running for a nonpartisan seat, like a city commissioner seat, to gain the most traction, to bring in the most votes, and then also, once they're in that seat, to be able to connect with their constituents and do a good job?
I would say that we, especially now, a lot of people lead with fear because fear is a motivator, sure. Right? And, if you start with fear and all the reasons why the world will end if I'm not elected, or if my party's not elected, or if my idea doesn't go forward, that can be very powerful. And we can see that is, that's why it continues, right? Because sure. it works. But I think that when you're talking to parents who have children, we're already afraid enough that we're going to make a mistake, or we're not going to get them in the right school. And there's in Lakeland in particular, and in Polk County, we've done a lot of things to add choice, like charter schools, magnet schools, Christian schools. We have
so many options.
Academies. But then you have to navigate this lottery system, and you're stressed out, like of where you're going to get to school. And if you think about why someone would go to school to be a teacher, You know, to me, teachers are like missionaries. They're like heroes. I mean, they're kind of like healthcare workers. I mean, they chose that position most likely because they want to serve and they love children. So whatever school they're in, I think to tell the teachers that you want to champion their efforts, because so often we see things that are wrong, and they are wrong, and we need to advocate for things that are wrong. But the way we do it makes the people who are already serving feel so defeated and so demoralized, and they're already, their pay is not very much. And so I feel like, kind of like the Ronald Reagan era of casting vision, the city on a hill, to me, is what I look for as a mom, because I'm like, yeah, no joke. Who can't be the critic and who can't go and say all the things that are wrong? But who's going to help me solve the problem? Right. We have a huge 100,000 kids, a $2 billion budget. I mean, that should be like a Fortune 500 CEO at the top of that. Can you imagine? And all of the employees, from bus drivers to maintenance workers to teachers and unions. I mean, that in itself, the job of
huge operation.
So to acknowledge that the job is bigger. Yes. I think that would be, if I saw a candidate running and they go, God, this is a huge budget, $2 billion. And they acknowledge that, and they've thought about that, and they maybe have some experience, whether, even if it's a small business, you still, know what a P&L is. You know that you have to make cuts, and that you know how to keep people, recruit talent, things like that. So I would say having an acknowledgement of the actual job, meaning, that whole, and then and understanding, acknowledging. Nancy Duarte is one of my favorite communication experts. And she wrote this book, Resonate. She looked at all the speeches throughout time that resonated with people. And from Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount to just all these speeches. And she said that when you try to sell something and all you do is tell all the benefits, people know that it's going to be expensive and hard, and they know all the obstacles. So if you don't act like they have to let you know. Right. But if in your speech, as you're casting vision of going to this new bliss, you acknowledge the obstacles, and you acknowledge how hard it's going to be, and you acknowledge what those teachers go through every single day, and how big that budget is, and how hard it is to advocate at a state level, and how large our geographic location, our district is so huge, and yet still then sprinkle in, but these are some things that I feel like if we could do this, that's a huge winning combination. And I think would be very refreshing for most parents to see. And so how you communicate what you believe, yes, tell the things that you see that are wrong, the things that you're worried about as a parent, because parents see that too. But also say, don't stay there like it's so bad that it's going to be the apocalypse. And so let's just all hunker down. What else is our choice if it's that bad? I think then cast vision and give hope, and to say how, we could bridge the gap and be a better district, and kids can go in a brighter future. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I feel like people pick either or, like, oh, it's so wonderful, or everything's so terrible.
Doom and gloom.
And I think it's like, yes, show us what you don't like about the county, because you've seen it. You're a teacher, you're a business owner, you're a parent when you're running. But then also show me some solutions, and show me you've got what it takes, knowing the parameters, like things that are determined by the state, things that are already predetermined with your budget. So,
well, I think that's good. I think that's good advice. And I have one last question for you. With all of this growth that you touched on quite a bit, how do you, as a decision maker for the city, balance the impact of growth and yet try to appease the two different parties, if you will, in the city, those that want to see that growth, that are excited about Lakeland booming, and then the other side that really just wants to hold on to that small town charm? How do you balance?
I think that is going to be our biggest challenge in the coming decade. When I saw that we were the second fastest metropolitan area, like after Austin, Texas, and then we were tied with Boise, Idaho, I was overwhelmed, because here we've had, like, I was a teenager in the 80s and no one went downtown. And in the 90s, similarly. And so much to where we couldn't really, our EDC could not get big companies, good jobs, reinvigorate that downtown. It was a hard sell, right? And you saw cities throughout the country just kind of fledgling and younger people moving away. And so they just kind of die. And so certainly I didn't want that to be our trajectory. And we took a strategic path with our city and our economic development community to focus on our creative class and make our downtown beautiful, to invest in our makers, third spaces. And now you can see the fruit of that. People like our authenticity downtown. They like our restaurants and our retail establishments. But it was very strategic, and it took a long time to get it that way because we have Catapult that's on, incubating entrepreneurs. They need a lot of support to make it. So we've become a community, and I hear it all the time because I'm on the board of Catapult, of incubating and coming around these small businesses and creative ideas. And we've flourished and benefited because of that. And they need that support. So, but then you become so popular that, I'm on the Tourism Development Council board, and in the month of January, when you look at they do this geomapping, and every adult 18 and older who came inside the county for whatever reason, Legoland, you'd think would be number one, Bach Tower, all the different amenities. Downtown Lakeland was the number one place. Wow. And it was like times 7. It was really, I was like, is this every month this dramatic that everyone comes to Lakeland as their destination from outside? And then you're like, oh my gosh, the biggest complaint we hear from residents is traffic and that road diet and, the pinch points. And so every time there's a new development, whether they're coming to switch their zoning or actually they might have, development by right that we can't really have any say about. That's what people are concerned about. And then we kind of go up against the county. So when roads are shared, city, county, or if it's a state road like the South Florida Avenue, they think we have a lot of power. We might not have much power at all. So we have been asking at almost every meeting, or at least I have in particular, is that we, again, just like we need every stakeholder on issues that, people care about, we need every stakeholder that lives in the neighborhood where the development is going. We need the developer to come to the table and be willing to maybe buy a bus or to be able to improve the traffic signaling and you first come in, you're like, I just want low taxes, right? Like we have to be fiscally conservative. We want low taxes. I think very few people know that the city of Lakeland has lower taxes than Mulberry. And if you look we're here in Mulberry, how many parks do people from how many people outside Polk County come to Mulberry? Right. But those parks are very expensive to maintain. We happen to have an electric utility that we receive a dividend from that eclipses our property taxes. Our property taxes don't even cover our police. And so we do have some decisions to make. We can either have the very lowest, like the third lowest, property taxes in the state, and then have to start cutting services or figure out how to sell off our parkland, to developers because we can't afford to maintain them. Or we're going to have to get creative here. And the only way we can do it is, in my opinion, is spread it out. Meaning you don't want to just blame developers. Like all developers aren't rich developers. Who just make, maybe there are some greedy developers who make too much, and you need to say, listen, if you want to build here, you've got to have more skin in the game because we can't have you build and then have this congested failing road. Right. That doesn't benefit anyone. Or not, if you're a new business and you have jobs, how do you think people are going to get to your job if there's no transit, and the road's already congested? So I think that going forward, we have to think of where we live, especially with local government, the government closest to people. What you do matters. How you advocate is heard. And things are changed at meetings when people show up. And I feel like people don't always know that until it affects their neighborhood. And if they've got a really good HOA or if they've got a really strong supporter and they rally the troops, then they go, wow, that really made a difference. Doesn't mean we can always go the direction of the neighborhood or the group that's advocating. We might be legally constrained because oftentimes we're in a quasi-judicial role, meaning if we don't give that developer a right to develop, and it's legally his right, and we just really want to placate the residents, well, then they'll sue us, and we may or may not win that lawsuit based on how we judged and what we used as our rationale. So we are constrained with certain, and our city attorney will say, you're in a quasi-judicial role. You cannot make a decision on cell towers, for instance, based on radio frequency. So if people are afraid that they're going to get cancer based on RF, that's not a legally permittable rationale for you to deny the cell tower. Well, that might be why everyone's there and everyone's afraid. And you think, I can't use the one thing that people are worried about. Well, that falls under the FCC purview. They need to advocate to the FCC and say, we think you should study this again. We've got RF everywhere. We are concerned about it. So that'd be the appropriate advocacy to make a change at the national level that then would filter down to me, but I'm constrained right now locally. Kind of brought up the life issue, or maybe it's the homelessness issue. There are things that absolutely I can decide, and it's in my legal purview. And we want to do that, and we want to work with citizens. But we might find out, shoot, I didn't get to vote for my citizens on that. But that shouldn't stop there. How can we help as a commission send a letter to the state legislators? How can we also advocate at a national level? Because we are finding that this is breaking down when it trickles down to us, and it's not what our community wants. So I would say that we are going to, like never before, have to pay attention to local government. We can't just assume that we elect people that we like and that they're going to take care of these things, because nobody's smart enough to solve the problems. If you look at I-4 7 years later and millions of dollars, and it took me 2.5 hours to get over to the other side of Orlando the other day. So not enough money in the world will build us out of this growth and this problem if we're not collectively working together. We're going to need multimodal transportation. We're going to have to think of our downtown Lakeland as an urban area, like it or not. And so then you don't get a parking spot right in front of your restaurant. How we then try to keep it more suburban or keep it more rural, I don't know. I ask that question every day. Like, is there room for a rural part of Lakeland, in the coming decade with the growth that's coming? Could we do that even by right or legally based on our state laws? Or would we, have to build a wall around Lakeland? Right. I don't think we can build a wall. I think they're coming, but I hope that if we work together and every stakeholder that cares comes to the table, that we'll at least have the best chance possible to make the wisest decisions. So,
well, I want to thank you for joining us today and giving us heartfelt answers and detailed answers. And I know that the job is complicated, and I know that at your heart, you're perfect for the position that you're in, and we value having you in the seat that you're in. So I just want to thank you, Stephanie, and hopefully we can have you back out again soon.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope that you'll just continue to advocate and be engaged at local government. Yes, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you do.
Yes, I think so too, and I think that's what we want to encourage our citizens to do too. Be involved, be engaged, and have a voice, and listen to others as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you.